Hi, I'm James DeFreitas with the Ask Mr. Greenthumb show, and today we're going to discuss propagation, specifically how you propagate an avocado from a pit.
Come grow with Stan and James DeFreitas on the Ask Mr. Greenthumb show. We hope to enlighten your senses with new ways to plant healthy greenery. You too can get the Greenthumb blessing. Come grow with Stan and James DeFreitas on the Ask Mr. Greenthumb show.
Everybody has an avocado, and it seems like it's one of the fastest growing fruits as far as people liking. It's partly, I think, because people realize the health benefits.
Oh, absolutely, and not only that, but it tastes great.
It does taste great, and you've talked about, I know, the health benefits of it before, that it has some fats, but you always say they're...
Well, it's a mixed fat. It's not, I mean, everyone, I think the issue is that everyone wants to turn around and say it's 100% healthy. Well, rarely is anything 100% healthy. Mostly it is healthy, okay? But it's a mixed fat. So there's good and bad with it.
I would say there's more good than there's bad, so I'm on the camp of you could eat one of these probably every day and it wouldn't hurt you at all. If you worry about calories, then maybe cut down your serving size. But this is one of the smaller ones. This is a California Hass. And it was actually developed around 1927 and became patented around 1935. And but you know, with today, we can have them over a longer period of time because people are bringing them in from Mexico, from Chile, and other parts around the world. Even as far as Australia and New Zealand sometimes.
Well, kind of an interesting fun fact with the avocado, in they asked him this. There's a guy that does a survival show called Bear Grylls, and they asked him, if you were to be trapped on an island somewhere, and you had to pick one fruit that you wanted to be on the island with you, what would it be? And he said the avocado. And it's, again, it goes to the idea that it does contain a great deal of fat, a great deal of energy, which would allow you to get through, you know, a survival type scenario, or just, you know, to live and thrive.
Sure. Now, you know, a lot of people, I think, too, would think that, you know, it's kind of milky looking, but almost like a pudding if you make guacamole like I like, which we have right here, which I just made just earlier today for your viewing pleasure. And you can see that it has a nice consistency, but it's one that also has good fiber. And today, when you talk to health experts, they're going to tell you fiber is really important.
It's super important. And I wish we had smell-o-vision out there for you audience members, because it is so pungent. All I can smell is the great goodness of avocado there.
I love avocados. You know, you think about Super Bowl time and avocados. And, you know, 30 years ago, it was a seasonal fruit. People just got avocados, you know, during the summertime. Today, you can literally have avocados at your store year-round. And even maybe more important for me is growing some of your own.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that a lot of people, you know, and I'm guilty of this too. I mean, you know, somebody winds up giving you one of these things, and then you're left with the pit when you're done, after you've made your delicious dip or whatever you've used it for on a, you know, sandwich or what have you. But you'd like to make more, and nature has given you the ability to make more. The problem is what do you do with it? Well, this is why you watch our show, because we're going to teach you what to do with it.
How about, you want to extricate the seed from here?
Well, I can certainly give it a go here.
Just take it out of there.
Which way do you recommend? Long, oblong ways? Or?
That's probably, oblong is probably the best way to get the seed out, I think.
All right, so we'll go ahead and, I guess, cut it from both sides maybe?
Yeah, so you can just kind of take the whole thing, and we can then have that wonderful edible part.
Okay, so now we've got the edible stuff here, and I guess maybe we just kind of give
the seed out. Now this is a small little seed here. Now the seeds can get to be large. They can be almost the size of this. And
I was going to say, that looks like a very small seed.
And it is, but it will also, you know, you can use it just as well. Do you want to try to put the toothpicks in?
Well, we can certainly give it a go. It's awfully
small.
Awfully small and very slippy.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of the nature's coating on it. The pointed in up. People ask me sometimes, okay, I'm going to use it as a house plant. And by the way, it makes an excellent house plant too for folks who live in cool areas. Avocados don't take cold real well. Now there are some varieties that'll grow as far in Florida as up around Gainesville, which is kind of the middle north part of the state. But there are some varieties called Winter Mexican, and that's where this variety would originate from. I think you're doing a great job. And you'll have this little tiny pit that will produce a tree that may wind up getting to be 30 feet tall. So we're going to stick this, and you could just put it here, and if you wanted to, you could add some
I don't
water.
think I've got the toothpicks exactly placed
We'll
correctly.
probably have to
but
adjust that, but you can easily put the water up here. And we'll make it a little later where it sits down in the water. Or you could put it directly into soil.
It was so slippy, and again, for some of you British watchers out there who are watching us in the UK, slippy is the term I think they use, that I was having trouble getting the toothpicks in the right spot.
I like the way the British sometimes say, pop on a jacket. You know, we'll talk about putting on a jacket, they'll have a pop on, which I think is kind of fun. But we're going to show you the foliage here of an avocado. This happens to be from my tree outside. And this tree I put out about 4 or 5 years ago. It was about 4 feet tall, and now it's about 25 to 30 feet tall.
Oh, it's a massive tree.
And you can see we've got a fruit here that's almost the size of that pit. It's actually bigger than the little pit.
Yeah, it's a different variety?
It's a little different variety than the Haas. This one I like because it actually gets twice the size of a Haas.
Okay, and does it taste the same or is it different?
To me, the taste is very similar.
Okay.
I think slightly better, but I'm probably biased.
No, as you should be.
And this fruit here is coming on. It out now has this little tree, probably has 100 fruit on it. And so I felt guilty about cutting this off, but I wanted you to see a small fruit, so I sacrificed it. Now, we're going to talk about growing avocados. You can do it from the pit, but when you do it from the pit, it'll probably take you about 10 years before it starts to produce.
And that's too long if you're going to want to have some of this yummy goodness.
Yeah, that's too long for most folks. So if we graft a tree, then we can easily speed that process up to just maybe a few seasons. As little as 2 to 3 years, we'll start getting some blooming. And avocados come on with a male and female, usually on the same tree. So that's kind of interesting. Often it'll open up, let's say, with a male flower, and then later on the flower changes to a female. And it does it staggered enough that it can pollinate itself.
Interesting, so almost hermaphroditic.
Yeah, it has that ability to do it by itself. In some trees you need 2 trees to cross-pollinate.
Is that why it takes 10 years before you actually see fruit?
Well, I think it's part of the reason that it just takes a good long while for it to do that, to become mature.
Okay.
When something becomes mature, it can go into its sexual cycle and then start to
so
flower.
it's still in the adolescent stage of that tree, which is one of the reasons why it isn't ready to do it yet.
So if I take a tree that's already 5 years old and I graft it onto a stem that's only maybe 6 months old.
Okay, so you're speeding up the process of Mother Nature in order so that we can have guacamole a little sooner at the table.
And we know that we're getting a variety that we know of and we like, and we know it's a regular producer. Seedlings sometimes go for a year or two and they don't produce, and they produce a little and then they don't produce. And speaking of the seedlings next to you, while we move that
You want
over
this
here.
center? You got it.
Now,
Now what's going on here? It looks like maybe this is dead here.
It is dead.
But from the top up, I guess you'd want to maybe cut that off, or?
I want to just see if there's life up here. This is dead up above. So
Okay.
give me the cutters next to you.
Okay, I can
And
do
if you
that.
want, we're going to let you cut it right along here.
I'm going to just cut the whole thing?
We're going to cut the whole thing off.
Okay, and
Foliage and all.
foliage and all?
Now we're getting rid of this. This got injured by the cold.
Okay, so that's why that's dead.
That happened. It was
So
outside.
I'm just going to cut it here at an angle or straight on?
Straight on's fine.
Straight on's fine.
All right, so
Okay.
we've cut that off, and you
All
see,
right.
what we're going to do is put a scion into this. This will be the rootstock.
Now, I don't know what that means, a scion. And if I don't know what it means, and growing up in a horticultural home, which I did, I'm assuming maybe the audience wouldn't either.
The scion is the growth part that we're attaching to the rootstock. This will be the rootstock from now on.
Okay.
And even though it had foliage up above, which was producing food, by us cutting it off, we're saying, okay, now you better graft, otherwise you don't get to live.
Okay. So that's a pretty good impetus to want to do something.
And it will. Sometimes you have to force nature into that process. Now, I could have cut the brown off and showed you that we didn't have any dieback, but I'm not trying to be, everything isn't perfect in my yard and my garden and
There's
my life.
another garden show for that.
Yeah, there's another person that has everything perfect all the time, and that's wonderful. But in real world, not everybody always, sometimes you get a few
And I
brownies.
personally think people appreciate that, to see what you actually experience in the real world instead of having, a staff of 500 people making it look perfect every second.
So we're not perfect. I'm not a perfect person, but we're going to work toward trying to be a little better.
Exactly.
Here, I'm going to hand this to you.
Okay, I get all the good stuff on
get
this
the good
show. I get
stuff.
the death and dying stuff.
And we're going to try to split this with a cleft graft, and I've got to be careful. In fact,
That looks like you could slip and get a thumb going there.
well, and I'll tell you the truth, I have done that before too.
Yeah.
So I actually have a little mark on my finger here
So
from
maybe we
about
wanna-
30 years ago.
So we definitely want to tell the folks at home that if you're going to do this, this is the time that you would want to take control of the knife. Don't let your this is not the one time to let your kid to be doing this. You take the knife and you do this part.
If you're like my son, he has a hand that can show you every screwdriver he's ever had.
And I can point to a recent mistake as of late. And if you notice right here, it's in the shape of a Phillips screwdriver head. But I will say I was able to complete the task, and I got it done. So a little pain for the gain.
Well, we appreciate that. Now you want to get the scion to be about the same size as what we have here. And you can see I just left the knife in there on this cleft graft. Now there are
Why do we leave the knife in? Just
Well,
because
because I'm going to open it.
you're going to open it further.
That's where I want it to be. And I'm going to take I'm going to take
Now,
all
how
of
did you learn how to do this?
Well, I went to horticulture school.
Well, yeah, but I mean, did you just did you experiment on your own, or?
And also, I was an extension horticulturist for 8 years. And part of what we did was to show people how to do some propagation, how to grow plants and how to propagate plants.
Okay.
So now we've done this as a simple cleft graft. There's also a side graft that's used quite a bit in citrus. And we may show that on another show sometime.
Okay.
And actually, what I should do,
Looks like you, and from just being on camera here, it looks like you want to find a really sharp knife to do this with, which is good and bad for the reasons we just discussed.
I'm going to let you go ahead and cut this other side like I did.
Okay.
Just to show people, and just because you're a handy kind of guy, you can do almost anything.
Yeah, and takes all the risk out of it for you.
That's right.
Yeah,
The most dangerous part I'm going to let you have on the other side. But be careful, go slow. A lot of folks if you start to jam this knife down here with your finger underneath, it could be a problem. So if you're in real doubts, put on a pair of gloves even to hold below the knife, and that way you limit.
Does that look about right?
That
Like
looks
a
about
wedge? So basically we're creating a wedge. I mean,
We
I
are.
don't know if the camera can pick that up or not, but it's like a wedge.
Yeah, just hold it there
And,
show them that the little edges is where the cambium is, that green layer.
Okay,
What
so
we're
we
gonna
want to
try to
turn
do-
it maybe a little bit this way so that you can
see it?
see it, because that looks kind of important for people to see it all the way around.
We've got the best videographers in the world, so that's the reason we get the shots to brighten up your day.
Okay, so
All right.
now that they've seen it,
All right, we're going to take it, and you've done a good job of that. We're going to try to unite these layers. So sometimes I'll take my knife and I'll stick it back into the wedge,
okay,
and then we'll try to unite them. We want something about the same size so that those layers can match up. And I may even get it just on the one there, but I'm going to push it down deep enough that it kind of holds itself, you can see.
Looks like you've got a nice good wedge going there.
Now, often there's grafting rubber bands. We don't have a grafting rubber band, so we're using one that you might use for the male. But you know what? It works.
Exactly, and if it works, then you don't have to go and get these fancy ones.
Adapt, improvise, overcome.
That's right.
And basically we just want it to kind of hold itself in place.
Okay, so this is kind of a safety second, so it doesn't just fall out because the cat's tail hits it or the dog gets too rambunctious around it.
Exactly. We want something.
Notice I blame the animals, not the human specimens.
And bring that back through here if we can. And the nice thing about grafting rubber bands is they're a little bit bigger.
Well, and the nice thing is you have such slender fingers that that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I might have you take this around once and try to make like a little knot there. I'll
Okay.
hold the pot. And James has little smaller fingers than mine, and that actually comes in handy when you're trying to do a graft because you want to make it tight, and that's good as long as it's there. We just want something to kind of hold it in place. And as James said, we don't want the cat or the wind or something else to knock it over. Now, I would probably take this and put it into an area where it's not in hot killer sun.
So if they're going to be doing this in the next couple of months, and again, that's another good question. Is there a better time of the year for this type of thing to take place than another?
It is, and during the growing season.
Okay, so spring.
During spring or summer,
Okay.
this bark can slip, and they call it, either in budding or in this case a cleft graft. We want that bark to be able to move a little bit. During the middle of the cool season, the bark is just hardened and it doesn't want to move and it doesn't want to split very easy. It's easier to cut into your finger.
Good, we don't want that.
And I say I've got one here from 30 some years ago in Hort School where I slipped with a knife doing this same thing I'm doing today.
So take your time.
Take your time, but there's a good chance this will grow. The little dead part over here I want to cut off. But we want this to put all the energy into the scion. And that rootstock has a supply of energy. And so it's going to come out. Now with the scion being already, let's say, 6 years old, it's ready. Once it starts to grow, everything from there will say, okay, in the next year, once we establish some foliage and stuff, we can start to put on bloom and we can start to put on avocados.
So you're getting the benefit of a matured part of another plant, which then makes up for what the adolescent plant isn't ready to do.
And in some cases, we'll graft for other reasons, not so much for avocado, but let's say for gardenias. They'll often graft on a very small, inconspicuous flower, but it's a very hardy rootstock. So sometimes rootstocks can impart hardiness, they can impart strength, sometimes even a little bit of cold hardiness from a rootstock that you wouldn't get from the seedling.
Okay, so you're getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah, in this case, we're getting a variety that I think is a very superior variety, and we're getting mature onto the immature wood so we have a chance of getting fruit, you know, in a few years. I mean, I've had folks call me and say, look, you know, I'm 90 years old. I want to get a fruit in the next year or two.
Right, so they have to be thinking quicker.
I don't have the next 20 years. So that's important.
So, and again, on the rootstock itself, again, foundationally, it's important that we're using a good compost material here for this to grow in.
Yeah, I used a good peat. I used some black cow manure just to improve the soil because I really wanted to. You can see it's down. You can see the old seed is almost gone. And that's happened in the last 6 months to a year. This was the remnants of what the energy that was in the seed. And you can see that seed was pretty good size just from the size of the remnant that's still there. But this tree lived on that energy that was in the fruit. Basically, an avocado is a big berry.
Okay.
And a big berry with some delicious fruit for us.
When they're planting the pit after it sprouts and it's got its tall linear bud, I guess, coming up from the seed, how far do they want to plant it into the pot? Do they want a pitcher's mound? Do they want it to be level with the soil? How far deep does the seed typically need to be planted when they're potting it?
I'd either plant it to the top of the seed or it's like an amaryllis bulb, which normally I leave about the top of the third of the bulb out of the ground.
Okay, so seeing a little bit of the bulb is not a bad thing?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this isn't really a bulb, but in the seed part, if we leave that part above the ground a little bit, that seed is used for energy. And as it's not, you can see, as we showed, the rest of that seed has pretty much been used and gone.
Yeah.
And so then you become a stem and you become a structure for the rest of the tree to grow on. Now, avocados can get to be 25, 35, 40 feet tall, depending on the variety. And you can literally have a number of different varieties. I love them because, you know, avocados cost you a couple dollars in the store and you can have hundreds in your own backyard. So if you're in an area where you can grow them, that's wonderful. Let me also say that a lot of folks will grow it even as a house plant. I've seen folks that would keep it for years and years and years as a house plant. I've seen them where they were like all around the room.
Sure. Well, and again, you've got a much larger avocado tree than I've seen in some people's yards. I know like at Tanya's, she's got a lot of dwarf varieties and she's wanting to keep them small. And I think partly, you know, it's easier to pick and, you know, and it's easier for her kids to go pick, which is pretty important for her. But even there, even when you're doing this kind of thing, I really think making sure that you have good soil and making sure that you start with a good foundation is the key to your success.
I think it's going to pay dividends down the road, just like watching our segments.
Absolutely.